With the first successful traversal into a new system and the surveying underway, the future looked bright for the humans of Earth. The surveying itself and the preparations for the second traversal by a new crew would take several months, and therefore, the governing bodies of Earth itself would focus on research. For their motto was that progress could still be made even with humanity in the same place it is in now. Earth was home to multiple research divisions, of which the first was physics. Led by head scientist Prathamesh Upadhyay, it was decided for the physics division to focus on zero-G laboratories. A lot of critical research could only be done in a zero-gravity environment, which these specialized laboratories were eminently designed for. Research like this would often be done on space stations, but this now would no longer be the case. The next division under lead of Tao Kong was society research, something that for now only catered to earthen society, but with the possibility in mind for future colonial societies. Their priority lay with unification. Humans had a history of disagreeing with one another. War was as old as the origin of man, but even in times of peace, people would disagree with each other and lashed out for the most minor things just to get their point across. This disagreement would be a pain in the neck for its government, as now the focus would need to be laid on expansion. Mingling amongst ourselves was too trivial to deal with at this point. Then finally, head scientist Na Zheng was at the head of engineering. Though engineering would be a huge part of colonization and setting up the first colonies if a habitable planet could be found, for the time being, they had to wait until more information was presented on the living conditions and precautions that needed to be made. Therefore, for the time being, they focused on strengthening the hulls of their corvettes. This made the people who were fearing human expansion in sights of coming across an alien species that was not peaceful at all, a bit more comfortable. Then, on February 6th of the year 2203, a date that would go down in history, reports came through to Earth that discovery of alien life had been made. The UNS Scout had made a startling find on Barnard Star 3. The planet was teeming with alien life. This amazing discovery had silenced those who believed we were alone in this universe. Although none of the alien creatures found on Barnard Star were sapient, it was likely only a matter of time before the humans encountered beings that were. Though the surveying by the UNS Scout would only be external, it did provide the scientists back on Earth with valuable information to make certain calculations. Barnard Star 3 had an overall wet climate. It was a rocky world with a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, active and stable hydrosphere. There were great landmasses that were separated by oceans, with large climate variations depending on latitude and precipitation. For the next coming weeks, the United Nations of Earth were abuzz with the news of the alien organisms discovered by the UNS Scout. It was the talk of the talk. Podcasts, talk shows, and blogs everywhere almost solely talked about this subject for the next month or so. It was on everybody's mind, and people were already fantasizing about what kind of creatures or discoveries could be found next. This media buzz came to a climax when the UNS Sojourner, the second science ship that would go towards the system left on the chart, was launched on its journey. It would take about half a year before they would reach their destination, and then surveying could start here as well. The following month, a scandal struck Earth, and the topic on everybody's mind, the talk shows, blogs, and podcasts, drastically changed. Troubling reports had come up regarding the deteriorating health of Governor Hui Wu. His haggard appearance made it look as though he had aged nearly 20 years. The burden of duty could be a heavy thing to bear, many said. There was some speculation about what caused this. Some believed it was stress, some believed he got sick, and others joked about substance abuse. The irony in this was that those joking about the substance abuse were right. Internal reports were handed to Muwanga, showcasing that Wu had indeed been guilty of using forbidden substances. This was problematic, but she also realized that this was not the time to turn this into a major scandal across the entire globe. She ordered in secret for a proper follow-up for his governing to be found, and if worse came to worst, they could immediately abdicate him and replace his governmental position with a new person. But for the time being, Wu would continue to lead Earth, and his current agenda was still to deal with unemployment that had risen over the last 3 years. Not to an alarming rate, but to a number where resolve could be given to it. More commercial zones were planned to be added. This created jobs, but also distractions for the people, as business opportunities would flow throughout. Some believe, therefore, that it was Muwanga that suggested this, as it was another distraction away from Wu's health issue. A little over halfway of July, the UNS Sojourner had reached their aimed system dubbed the Ceti System. In some ways, it had things in common with Barnard's star, but more intricate differences needed to be found first through exterior surveying. The science ship would lay down a route that would move it all throughout the system and would last several months. All of the crew, much like the UNS Scout before them, had made it through unscathed. The crew hoped to find discoveries that were as earth-shattering as Who's crew back in the Barnard star system. But the first few surveys did not result in anything particular being picked up. But then, some peculiar news arrived from the UNS Scout. When Hugh's crew had stumbled upon what seemed an abandoned ship near Barnard Star 2A in their current system. It had been left to drift aimlessly above this moon. The massive sails protruding from its hull suggested that it relied on solar power to function. Though the Earthen government opted for Wen Hu to send in a search party to inspect the ship, the decision would ultimately be hers and hers alone. As the ship seemed unmanned, she agreed to send in a search party. Radio contact would be established the whole time, and at the nearest sign of trouble, the order to return to the ship would be given without any question asked. Hu made sure to send word of this discovery and her decision to the people of Earth. She did not want them to be put in the dark, and of course, this sparked massive discussion and debates everywhere on what the ship could be and who or what it would belong to. The people were clustered to their devices to learn anything they could about the discovery. It would take several days or maybe weeks until a public statement would be made. Back in the Sol system, some additional ships were added to the main fleet after hearing about the discovery of the abandoned ship. A new meeting was called for as well, to talk more in depth about the way the humans would approach their expansion. Sooner or later, one of these two systems would need to be claimed in the name of humanity, and for this, they came up with more efficient ways of doing so. To create but a beacon, or at least evidence, that this now belonged to man. At the end of that year, a statement on the abandoned ship discovery was finally released by Wen Hu herself. The sublight vessel was built by an unknown culture, and appears to be several thousand years old. One of the massive sails had a large tear, where some kind of object passed through, which appeared to have disabled the vessel. Although the technology of the ship was severely outdated, it did possess some interesting engineering design choices. Interesting, but primitive. By 2204, the Barnard star system had been completely surveyed. More discoveries could be made on the planets themselves, but that was not the current objective of the UNS Scout. A new party would soon be sent over to conduct more tests in the system, but for now, Wen Hu's ship was off to a new system and discover its secrets. By now, the public statement of the abandoned ship was still on everybody's mind. Intelligent life taunts with pointed absence, read a popular Newsnet post on Earth. The people were apparently finding some humor in the fact that the lower forms of alien life were now a matter of public record, but potential equals from other stars continued to elude them. Some joked that they did this on purpose, as they saw the human race as a dumb species that were below them. Regardless of this though, the fact that an abandoned ship was found indeed showed that sooner or later, contact with some other species and culture would be established. Though word of mouth already talked about plans to be made for the first colonization trip towards the Barnard star system, in reality, this was still far out. Much more needed to be surveyed there first. But it was agreed upon that Barnard star system was safe enough and was ripe with opportunity to be the first system to be claimed by man outside of Sol. A construction ship, the UNS Potomac, was sent out and would set up a starbase that would be run by a large crew of hundreds of people. Then in the months to come, they would set up facilities and mining stations while conducting tests for the possible colonization of the planets. It had now been 4 years into the 23rd century, and already many new and interesting discoveries had been made. People could only imagine where it would lead them further.